Yes, my name is Steve Marr, and what we're going to do is continue our SEMS series and focus today on mechanical integrity. Before we get started, just a couple of logistical items. This is a webinar using a WebEx interface. All of you are being put on mute during the course of the webinar so you can continue your ordinary business activities, site meetings, cell phone conversations, whatever, and then the rest of the participants will not be interfered with in terms of listening to the presentation. You'll see two screens on your computer, two windows on your computer screen, one of them being a PowerPoint presentation, the other being a video image of myself, Steve Marr, the presenter. And you've also got the ability to use a chat interface and contact our producer, Solveig Sather. The acronym for that is RMP, CORP. That's the interface for the chat in case you need to contact our producer. You might want to do that if you need to interject comments, if you have technical problems, and if you have other concerns or difficulties with any of these communications tools, please contact our main office number, 877-532-0806, and somebody will be glad to help you work out any computer problems that you're dealing with. So I think that pretty much covers the basics and housekeeping. Again, my name is Steve Marr, and I'll be focusing on mechanical integrity today as it applies to SEMS applications, safety and environmental management systems to offshore facilities. For the next 60 minutes, the key topics that I'll be reviewing are what's driving all this, how do you compare SEMS to other safety management systems that are out there, and what I'm trying to build up to is other resources you may have to make your implementation of the SEMS program a little easier. Talk about what is mechanical integrity, significant events that have driven the need for mechanical integrity programs, regulatory requirements, formulating program, monitoring it, auditing it, keeping it healthy, and tips on implementation, and also current events, what's out there and what's happening with BSEE and the other agencies in terms of regulatory development and also enforcement. I'd like to start out with talking about what's driving this. Basically, there have been a number of tragedies over the past decades that have really awakened safety professionals to the importance of their job and the need for good quality work and for very complete safety programs. When you look at a lot of the significant events over the past few decades, the items highlighted in red, 1984 Mexico City, Bhopal, India, 1988 Piper Alpha tragedy, 2005 Texas City, and last year in the Gulf of Mexico with the Deepwater Horizon accident. All these things were pivotal events towards that kind of triggered the development of various types of regulations. Again, what I want to do is lead up to an understanding of what mechanical integrity is, what the regulatory requirements are, and what are the resources you might have to very efficiently develop your program. One of the things to keep in mind that mechanical integrity and a lot of these other elements of safety management systems come out from observations and investigations for previous accidents. I mentioned those four pivotal events, pivotal process safety events that have really driven the development of regulations. When you look at all those different process safety accidents that have caused major business interruptions, lost confidence in contracts, increased regulations, when you look and drive down to what the root issues were, you realize that they're relatively simple precursors and ignition events. It's not a misunderstanding of the laws of physics, radical new technologies that we didn't understand the effects of. Root causes were typically the failure to maintain the design intent. And a lot of that design intent is encompassed by the mechanical integrity program. So when you look at those failures, a lot of those key accidents, that people realized the most effective mechanism for improvement was not really by addressing specific actions, but really by changing safety culture and the development and implementation of management systems. I've been involved in this business since the mid-'80s, and I've also served on the technical steering committee of the CCPS at that time. And I've watched the development of various regulations, often as a result of tragedies, up to the current day when we're looking at offshore facilities and the SEMS program. And when you look at in the mid-'80s when there was a technical management guidebook developed for managing process safety, and you look at the key elements there, and you look at what's in the SEMS program now, and also for onshore facilities, process safety management, and also risk management programs, you really don't see a lot of differences in terms of fundamental concepts, the fundamental elements that need to be managed. And over that time period, you've literally had hundreds of safety professionals looking at that, and that relative consistency, even though there are differences in some elements, but that general consistency of all those different requirements really hone in on the fact that these are fundamental elements for having a good program that manages safety. So what I'd like to do is make sure that there's a good understanding of how SEMS compares to some of the other programs that are out there. When you look at the different SEMS elements, safety and environmental information, hazards analysis, management of change, operating procedures, safe work practices, training, mechanical integrity, which is what our focus will be today, pre-startup review, emergency response and control, investigation of incidents, auditing of the different program elements, and also documentation requirements. When you look at all those, again, these are very similar to the other elements of other programs that are out there. Also, when you look at in terms of priorities and the things that are sometimes the most challenging, the items in red, hazards analysis, management of change, operating procedures, and mechanical integrity, bubble up to the top of the list. Not only in the 2006 early implementation or the proposed rule for SEMS, those are the 4 key elements that people considered a high priority. When you look at the citations that are issued and the things that get folks into trouble across a wide range of different types of process facilities, those 4 elements bubble up to the top. Doing a good hazards analysis to understand the basics of your needs for the programs. Managing change, because there's all sorts of things that are happening at a lot of facilities, and the importance of keeping control over that and understanding the impact of those changes. Operating procedures, so that you have consistent best practices in terms of how you operate those facilities, and also mechanical integrity, maintaining the functionality of key equipment, both equipment that's in normal operation and also equipment that may be on standby for key safety functions. All those things are fundamental elements. They were in the 2006 proposed rule, and these are the kind of things, these are areas that people get into trouble with across the board, whether you're looking at onshore facilities that are regulated by PSM and RMP, and also things that have caused troubles in the past for offshore facilities. Those 4 elements bubble up to the top as being very high priority concerns. When you look at all the different elements, the areas in green, mechanical integrity again on the left side of the green bubble, hazards analysis at the top of the green bubble, management change, operating procedures, all those again are overlap with other key programs. And I'll tell you how you can use that overlap to your advantage if you're, as you're trying to address the November 15th deadline requirements for SEMS. Also, on this slide is just a handy reference. I am not going to go through all those regulatory citations, but it's really a handy reference of how all the different SEMS elements and how they compare and where you can find these requirements in other PSM and RMP requirements. Again, this overlap is not a coincidence. You've had hundreds of safety professionals looking at these things for really over 2 decades. And there's a general recognition that these are the kind of things that need to be done to manage safety and the safety culture at facilities, process facilities, whether it be offshore or onshore. So let's get to the meat of it. Giving you a background, and I'll be cycling back to why I was talking about that overlap in a few minutes. But let's get into some of the details for what is mechanical integrity. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, mechanical integrity from Chemical Manufacturers Association, basically the fundamental premise was process equipment that is properly designed, fabricated, installed, and operated should provide reliable service if it is adequately inspected, tested, and maintained over the life of the facility. The key things there are reliability. You want reliability for not only your operating equipment to avoid process excursions, but you also want key standby equipment for safety to be functional when needed. A lot of safety equipment just sits there forever, and people don't pay too much attention to it, and they really don't know if it works or not unless you're testing it. or somehow verifying its functionality. And I'm not going to get into some examples of that. I've seen some really interesting cases when I've been at plant sites and you walk around and you notice a key safety feature disabled in pieces on the ground, and you ask, oh, why is that device in pieces? What are you doing to it? Oh, and the reply is, oh, it's been like that for months. It never comes on anyhow, so we just figured we could leave it disassembled and keep it a low priority. Whether it's active equipment or standby equipment, things that are critical for safety are necessary to maintain their reliability, and that's what mechanical integrity is all about. And we'll be talking a little bit in terms of ways to do that effectively, identifying critical equipment and finding ways to help manage the reliability of it. Definition of mechanical integrity: maintaining the design function of structures and equipment, and it's required by SEMS, Safety Environmental Management Systems, which is the focus of our talk here. Risk management programs, that's the EPA's requirements. PSM, process safety management, that's the OSHA requirements for onshore facilities. And also a variety of states have their own accidental release prevention programs, the ARPs, that also provide an ability for the states to work closely with facilities in their jurisdiction. Now, you'll also hear another term, preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance is one element of mechanical integrity, and for some of the simpler onshore risk management programs and state accidental release prevention programs, that preventive maintenance requirement is a stripped-down version of mechanical integrity designed for simpler facilities that represent a lesser hazard. Preventive maintenance, again, it's a key component of mechanical integrity, but the other elements of that, not just maintaining and preventing equipment from failing, but also some sort of inspection, testing, and repair of equipment. Once it's out of service, how long can it be out of service before it's repaired, and how do you repair it safely? All those are elements of mechanical integrity. Mechanical integrity can apply to any type of the device or structure. I'll tell you how to identify those in a few minutes. However, for regulated facilities, things that tend to come into these programs frequently are tanks, pressure vessels and piping, blowout preventers, pressure relief systems, emergency shutdown systems, rotating equipment, various control devices, and also active and passive protection features, and really any device that might be listed as a safeguard in a hazards analysis. That's one of the key indicators for what you need to cover by your mechanical integrity program. If you've done a hazards analysis, a lot of people use the HAZOP approach for that. And if you need any background on that, we've got recordings of previous webinars on hazards analysis that we can send to you. Those exercises, the HAZOP study that lists the safeguards, if you've listed it as an important safety function, certainly you need to somehow assure its reliability. If you've identified an initiating event as something that can trigger a potential process upset that causes problems, certainly that needs to have some sort of pedigree associated with it and somehow be encompassed by your mechanical integrity program. That doesn't mean that all equipment and all items need to be addressed with the same priority, but you'll want to understand the importance to safety of that device and your programs for maintenance, inspection, testing, and repair around that. Mechanical integrity can also be used to improve the reliability of your facility and, of course, operability and profitability. However, the focus of all these different safety programs and what the regulators are looking for, of course, PSM, RMP, and SEMS, is the safety and environmental issues. So let's talk about some examples of mechanical integrity problems that have occurred and the sort of things that people look for. When you're looking at different events that have involved mechanical integrity failure, many of these basically have caused the formulation of safety management systems, regulations, and a lot of these failures have been rooted in mechanical integrity, snafus, if you may, things that haven't gone right, deficiencies in the program, vulnerabilities with respect to how people have applied these best management practices. And when you look at these accidents, not only does it give you an example of the importance of mechanical integrity, but also the kind of things that can go wrong at facilities. When you look at the Flixboro event in 1974, basically it was a temporary bypass that was fabricated in the plant, never designed for that service with the temperature and pressure environment and the thermal cycling associated with the reactor. And there may have been some alignment issues associated with its installation. All those things contributed to the fact that it was not suitable for service, and eventually it did fail and resulted in 28 fatalities. When you look at a lot of the tank fires that have occurred over time, a lot of them are rooted in the failure of the level indication systems and also the safety alarm systems, a fundamental thing that would be covered by a mechanical integrity program. When you look at the Texas City event in 2005, again, level instrumentation. Well, there are a number of things that were done that were contrary to good startup practices for that unit. But with respect to mechanical integrity, you've got alarm failures and also level transmitters coupled together, and again, hinged on mechanical integrity. And Texas City is a good example of many major accidents. And it's not just one failure. It's one mistake, perhaps, that's done at the same time that something else isn't working properly, coupled, or several things not working properly, coupled together that can lead to a catastrophic event. And in this case, there were 15 fatalities associated with that. Deepwater Horizon that resulted in 11 deaths last year. Also, there are a lot of things that have come out with respect to the functionality of blowout preventers. Again, cycling back to the importance of mechanical integrity programs. So let's look at the regulatory requirements for SEMS. We looked at the SEMS pinwheel a few minutes ago. Mechanical integrity in the lower left at the 7 o'clock position. Basically, you've got a key element that's incorporated by SEMS, and the specific requirements are spelled out there in 30 CFR Part 250, Section 1916. Basically, those key requirements, and there's a lot more detail there that you'll want to be at least aware of, but the key requirements are to establish and implement written procedures to maintain the integrity of equipment. A lot of really powerful words here. You basically establish means the responsibility to put it together. Implementation is don't just put it together and put it on the shelf. It's something that's got to be implemented, functional, and we'll be talking shortly about auditing your program to maintain the ability for it to do its intended effect. Written procedures. It's got to be written down. In my home, I don't write down all my maintenance activities. There's a lot of things that go wrong, and I just deal with it when it happens. That's my own house and my own choice. It's not a process facility that can have a catastrophic consequences and can potentially severely injure or kill various people and have a significant impact on the environment. For process facilities, it's got to go way beyond informal practices and be written procedures to maintain the desired functionality of that equipment. Also, it's got a part of the program, training is required. You've got to make sure you train maintenance and inspection personnel what to look for, how to maintain it safely, again, to maintain that desired functionality. Inspections and tests have to be performed on process equipment. It doesn't say test it every day, test every equipment. You've got to define, based on the reliability and experiences of the equipment, how often to test, how often to inspect, and again, SEMS is a performance-based standard, just like PSM and RMP, and it's the objectives that have to be met by the process facility operator and anybody else who works there, including contractors. Talk more about that later. Frequencies of inspections and tests. Again, you can get it by experience, but you can also, what you start with are manufacturer's recommendations and good engineering practices, and then as you work your program, keep records, identify what failures have occurred. You can factor those experiences back in. Sometimes you may want to do it more frequently if you've got problematic equipment, but many times you can relax your programs. There was one case recently. I was at a facility, and they were doing non-destructive examination on a pressure vessel annually. And it was a non-corrosive, it was a hazardous chemical, but it wasn't corrosive, and the vessel materials were certainly suitable for the service. And we took a good look at that and started asking, why are you doing that? And basically, they'd just taken the startup practice and kept pushing it forward. It was an excellent case for relaxing the requirement and actually spending less resources on that. What does that mean? Why would you want to spend less resources? Well, there's a profitability issue that, of course, management wants to hear about. But also, if you're a safety professional with limited time and a lot of responsibilities, you can then focus on the things that are really important if you can relax certain areas based on good operating experience and good failure histories for equipment. Looking back to Part 250, Section 1916, again, the requirements include documentation, making sure an ability to identify and correct deficiencies outside acceptable limits. And also having a quality assurance program, making sure fabricated equipment is suitable for the process applications, performing checks and inspections to ensure installation and consistency with design specs and manufacturer's recommendations, and ensuring that maintenance materials, spare parts, and equipment are suitable for their service. That's also encompassed by management change. A lot of these different management elements overlap. Management change, if you're changing and putting in different pieces of equipment or different subparts to a component, you need to make sure they're suitable for their service. Now, there are various regulatory requirements out there that help do that. I've listed a lot of the key API requirements. A lot of them apply directly to SEMS and also the offshore environment and specific offshore equipment such as blowout preventers, surface and subsurface safety valves, etc. All those regulatory requirements are out there. And there's a general, also you'd want to add to this list too, API Recommended Practice 75, which is the SEM program that's referenced heavily by the SEMS requirements in 30 CFR Part 250. A lot of this hinges on recognized and generally accepted industry standard governing documents. Regulatory requirements aren't going to reinvent the wheel and tell you you need to apply every document, every regulatory requirement to this and that. And in this case, a lot of these are recommended practices and not specific regulatory requirements. But this and also the ragged gap generalities in PSM and RMP, which are recognized and generally accepted good engineering practices, all those hinge upon the fact that the regulators expect you to understand the best practices that are out there and make sure that you're consistent with that. Does that mean you need to apply every regulatory or every recommended practice? No, but you ought to be aware of what's out there and make a conscious decision of what applies and what represent good applications. So let's talk about some of the key elements. What's part of the program and also how do you formulate it effectively? The first thing you want to understand is what are the key responsibilities. The person in charge of the program, often the safety coordinator, SEMS coordinator, a lot of people have different responsibilities and different titles in different companies, but there's a responsibility to ensure that there's an established and implemented written procedure to maintain the ongoing integrity of process equipment. Each employee and contractor that are involved in maintaining that has to be given an overview of the process and its hazards and ensure that the person can perform the job task in a safe manner. There also has to be regular inspections and tests of equipment and performing the required maintenance work. And also maintaining inspection, testing, and maintenance records. All those things are fundamental responsibilities for maintaining an active and healthy mechanical integrity program. When you look at the program itself, there's a lot of different things that you need to consider. You start with requirements. What is really necessary? Identifying the critical equipment can come out of a HAZOP study. It can come from a lot of different places. Once you've identified what the requirements are and dig up OEM requirements for testing, inspection, and maintenance, you need to manage the program. You need to develop procedures to help you manage it, train personnel to make sure it gets done properly, perform the inspections, tests, maintenance, and repair activities in a safe manner that assures the necessary reliability or the desired reliability of equipment. You need to have documentation for what's being done, and also feedback loop. What are you actually experiencing out there? What failures have occurred? What types of failures would have been their impact? So you can cycle that back into the program. So this whole thing is a loop. It's basically not a static activity. It's not an activity that's isolated from other SEMS elements, but it's something that is an ongoing, evergreen activity that cycles to maintain its health. And also, by cycling it and using that feedback and what the experiences are at your facility, you can often impact the requirements in a way that helps you focus your program properly. This just lists out the different program elements. And the next thing I'd like to talk about is basically formulating the program. Again, typical equipment that you include are pressure vessels and storage tanks, piping systems, blowout preventers, relief vent systems, and other devices, emergency shutdown systems, various controls, automatic protection features, valves that may initiate an undesired process excursion, and also if you're getting a release of materials. Do you have gas detectors? What is their function? Are they calibrated? How do you verify that they're going to function the way they are intended? A lot of facilities that have gas detectors haven't made that a priority, and my understanding is that there tends to be a very high frequency of failure when people actually go through not just testing the calibration of the detector, but looking at what the functions are and do they occur properly. Also pumps, other rotating equipment such as compressors, all those may be key portions of the program. When you're formulating the program, again, you want to start with industry best practices and adjust the testing and maintenance activities and frequencies based on field observation. There may also be types of tests that aren't needed based on what your experiences are with respect to equipment reliability. Equipment manuals and suggested maintenance tasks and frequencies are included. And as I mentioned before, the hazards analysis and LOPA, safeguards and the causes can identify critical safety devices. Now, when you're looking at formulating the program, there's a lot of things you can get from the equipment manufacturer. For compressors, for example, you get a variety of things to check on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis. And those are the kind of things that you'll want to track in the mechanical integrity program. Again, it's an evergreen process, and a key part of the program are reminder systems and work order generation to make sure these things happen. When you're looking at vessel suggested maintenance, I mentioned API recommended practice 510 before. There may be an external inspection requirements. A lot of people do it every 5 years, and also internal and on-stream inspections at less frequent occurrence. API 510 also looks at pressure relieving devices, and basically most people do a 5-year test and calibration of the relief devices to make sure they're properly functional. A lot of times, depending on the size of the device and how readily it can be replaced, a lot of people just replace them on certain frequencies. When you're looking at blowout preventers, this is just an example of a specific manufacturer's recommended maintenance practices for the packer, lip seals, and also getting into the BOP, disassembling it, verifying its functionality, and also opening and closing it to verify that its intended function actually occurs. And when you're doing this, you want to use, as I mentioned before, not only the manufacturer's recommended practices, but also correlate that to various API and other industry recommended practices. When you're looking at surface safety valves, those come with specific inspection points on a periodic basis. In this particular case, they have guidance on what to do twice a month, every month, and so on and so forth. There's also various API requirements for looking at surface safety valves. 14B and also 14H takes a look at SSVs. So all these things are out there and available to supplement your knowledge base and how you're formulating your mechanical integrity program. Now, chances are most of you guys out there are already doing most of this. In the past, a lot of it's been done informally and without a lot of documentation. What the mechanical integrity program that's part of SEMS is doing is really trying to take those best practices, putting a structure to it so that it's implemented with a little bit more reliably to ensure the reliability of equipment, and also to make sure it's across the board. People are addressing things in a relatively consistent manner and a way that BSEE can do their job in terms of enforcement and inspections. So when you're looking at the formulation, again, you're going to want to use your experiences to feed it back into the process. If you get premature failures, if you get a piece of equipment that sometimes you just get a lemon that's got certain types of failures that occur all the time, you're going to want to factor that into your mechanical integrity program and find a way to make sure that you inspect it and test it and make sure it does its intended function in a reliable manner. And in particular, isolation valves are very important. Not only testing it, sometimes people do a partial stroke test, but also general verification of functionality. So once you've developed the program, and as you're implementing it, one of the things you need to do is monitor the health of the program, monitor its implementation, and also correcting any deficiencies that occur. So what I want to talk about is those monitoring elements, how you audit your own program, what to look for, what sort of things have caused problems in the past, And also, I've got some insights from an agency representative who worked with us on another webinar that I'd like to share with you as they've gone through and have been monitoring the implementation of the SEMS program for facilities in their jurisdiction. So the key thing in terms of monitoring elements, you want to have key elements that you're looking at. Is everything properly covered? Have you covered in your mechanical integrity program all the critical equipment? Have you determined requirements for procedures, testing, training, inspection, maintenance, and quality assurance? Are you efficiently scheduling resources? If you don't make good use of your resources, you maybe have a program that's really unworkable. Mechanical integrity programs are very easy to audit, and they're easy to find deficiencies. You basically can go, an auditor, a regulator, or your own internal auditing staff from corporate can come in, basically say like, okay, let me look at your HAZOP study. In there, they can pick some key safety features such as a PLC, such as an automatic isolation device, and say, all right, fine, show me the mechanical integrity program for this device. Then they can look at inspection records. So they can take it all the way from the definition, a very specific definition of requirements, to inspection records. And a lot of people have trouble keeping up with these programs, not only getting the maintenance done, but also documenting it. And because it's so problematic and it's easy for things to slip through the cracks, that's why it comes up pretty high on the citation list too. So these are the kind of things you want to make sure that you efficiently schedule resources and manage very carefully, because it's very easy to have deficiencies in your mechanical integrity program. You also want to have a good reporting system. Make sure you have performance and quality audits, and you want to make sure your project management and staff are sufficiently experienced to get the job done. Sure. Does this work better? Okay. No. Okay. Was it coming through weak? No. Oh, okay. I'm too animated. Well, actually, I guess I had my coffee this morning. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about monitoring. Also, as part of the monitoring program, you'll want to make sure you're looking at documentation, that there are written procedures for identifying the systems that are necessary for mechanical integrity, the methodologies, how you're inspecting it, how you're training, how you respond to maintenance and repair issues. What are the reporting systems? Is everybody aware of how to report, who to report to, and does your maintenance department consistently use a work order process or some means of documentation to generate the need for maintenance, make a decision what priority and how quickly that maintenance needs to occur. Also, there's various system and equipment information packages that provide system identification and various supporting documents. So let's talk about general approaches to an audit. Again, the challenges are that these are very large requirements for complex facilities, and for complex or larger facilities, the breadth of the program is really significant. You've got a lot to do. Key objectives of the audit have to be to verify that to first define the requirements and priority for what you're doing, and make sure those requirements are defined in the mechanical integrity program. And you want to look at how the program is managed. Are the procedures followed? Do they exist? Are they complete? Do they address not only the reliability of the equipment, but also the importance of protecting the safety of maintenance personnel? Is the training adequate? Again, training to make sure the maintenance personnel do their job properly and can do it safely. Performing inspection, testing, maintenance, and repair. Frequencies, how to do it, exactly what needs to be done, and what represents a success. If you're testing something, if it's off by, if a valve closure is off by a fraction of a second, is that really an issue? Do you need to implement some sort of maintenance, or is that acceptable? Documentation. Following through with the documentation is a key snafu. I've gone to lots of facilities. I know they're maintaining it. I know the people who do the maintenance, and sometimes they don't do the best documentation, but that documentation has to be done. Those are citable items when a regulator comes through and audits your program. So when you formulate your own internal audit, those are also very important to do. The feedback mechanisms, how you actually get the program working and get information into the program. And also, you may need general other expertise, contractors to do special maintenance requirements, and also interfacing with corporate offices. That interface is important to define and also make sure it's working properly. So the key objective for your audit is to gauge the mechanical integrity program effectiveness. General approach, again, as I mentioned before, what an outside auditor would do and what you want to do is to identify the key components. How's that identification done? Find a couple of key components and follow it all through the process. Review the inspection, testing, maintenance requirements, and also go back and look at the records. Is the maintenance being done? Is it being documented? Does the documentation show that something was done? And if it didn't pass the test properly, what types of corrective actions were issued? And is it being done in a timely manner? Again, I've gone to lots of plant sites, and when you look at work orders that were generated with a 30-day requirement and they get done 6 months later, those are citable items. Your program is not working. Maybe somebody made a decision that 6 months is fine. Great, document it. Go back, use that cyclical approach, go back into your program and document that 6 months is fine, and then you've got a program that works. Audit techniques that are useful is a protocol. We usually show up on site and use an audit protocol, look at documentation. Interviewing people is something that isn't done enough, in my opinion. A lot of people go through and do a paper exercise to verify things. You need to go talk to people too. Find out what their concerns are, find out what they're actually doing. You may even want to inspect how people are actually doing their job on a couple of key cases. Spot inspections, interviews, they don't have to be lengthy, but discussing things with people is really important. And then, of course, documentation. A good audit has some documentation that follows up. And in terms of SEMS, it's an actual requirement. There's a requirement for a pre-audit plan, and we'll get into some of the things that have changed recently in the proposed rule. But there's requirements for pre-audit plan, approval of auditors, and a prompt audit follow-up with at least the documentation and a plan of action to address any deficiencies. Again, getting out there and talking to people and actually doing a walk-down is super important. This is a photograph that I took when I was doing a general site inspection. Which you probably recognize the bird's nest and the eggs in the middle of the bird's nest in this eye wash station. I'm guessing this hasn't been tested for a while. And those are the sort of things that you need to be out there in the field looking at the health of the facility. I worked with a refinery manager years back, and one of the things that he did as part of his job, he just got there early in the morning, around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and what he'd do is he'd pick just one unit and go do a little walk down every morning. You know, right at dawn is part of his morning activities, part of his morning walk before he got sucked into all the other things that were part of his job. And it's that hands-on, the visual approach, and actually looking at the overall health of the facility that can be really important. So what sort of things have got people in trouble before? So let's talk about some common deficiencies. Written procedures not complete or not implemented. That's straightforward. It's an easy thing. It's an easy trap to fall in. Inspections and maintenance not occurring on the frequency that's defined, or they're not being done consistent with industry standards or best practices. Not corrected in a safe or timely manner. I mentioned to you about the standby safety equipment that was in pieces when I went over to the plant site. It needs to be defined how long something can stay out of service before it's unacceptable. That's got to be part of your program for standby equipment. Facilities that rely on a contractor and just say, oh, Joe comes in here every 6 months and does some stuff and then maintain our equipment, that just doesn't cut it. You need to know what the contractor is doing, and you want to keep duplicate copies of the records, because ultimately as the facility operator, you have responsibility for making sure that the mechanical integrity program is properly implemented. And documentation. If it's not documented, most agencies will consider that it didn't occur. And if it didn't occur, that's a citable item. Good documentation for the mechanical integrity program. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of things that can help you out there with respect to computerized maintenance management systems, but not documenting that activity can get you in a lot of trouble. Let's talk about some things. These are some slides from a similar seminar that we did about a year ago on the SEMS program when SEMS was first being implemented. And these are some agency insights from the California State Lands Commission's oversight of the Safety Environmental Management Program for several offshore facilities on the West Coast. Basically, the most critical mechanical integrity elements that they found were testing and PM of safety instrument systems. Basically, all the items that show up on a safe chart, making sure that there's testing and PM requirements. Also looking at emergency support systems, lower explosive limit gas detectors, thermal flame and smoke fire detection systems, fire loop detection and suppression, spill containment features, emergency shutdown, and also subsurface safety valves. Other support systems, life-saving and escape or abandonment systems for offshore facilities, fixed firefighting systems, auxiliary or emergency power, pressure relief systems, and control air systems. These are all things that were considered very critical that need to be looked at. Tank and pressure vessel integrity, piping integrity and corrosion monitoring, electrical system integrity, steel structures, the decks, ladders, catwalks, all those things need to have some sort of inspection part as part of your mechanical integrity program. Long maintenance backlogs were things that were cited and also found. And as I mentioned before, these are tough programs to keep up with. There's a lot of different elements. There are also various peaks where a lot of things need to be done. Also some unexpected activities. The mechanical integrity program doesn't always have everything that you can plan weeks and months in advance. You have turnaround activities that you can plan that represent peak activities, but you also have equipment that fail and involve your maintenance department in various repair activities. So those sort of things, if they're a couple of times if they're slipped, it's not going to be a catastrophe. But if you've got a chronic backlog for your maintenance department, that's something that is observed and has been cited before as part for offshore facilities. Also, use of safety walkdowns to identify hazards and fitness for service problems are things that have been identified in the past as concerns. Now, one of the key insights, too, from their SEMP program implementation and oversight is basically that the computerized maintenance management systems do help build and tie together the programs. Basically, it also allows the agencies to have a really good feeling that things are getting done as part of the mechanical integrity programs. It can help you monitor the backlog for getting to these various work orders. These required test inspections need to get done on the required schedule, and a computerized maintenance management system can help out. What they found is the folks who do embrace this, get on top of it, at least management knows when things aren't happening, and you can manage your mechanical integrity program a lot better. The CMMS can give a true prediction of maintenance and repairs that must occur at a major shutdown, and also it can help you formulate a critical spare parts list. Maintenance responsibilities, detailed information records, and other management tools are readily there. A lot of people can take a look at it, and it can really help you understand if your program is healthy and things are getting done properly, and it does help things get done a little bit more smoothly. So let's talk about implementing in a sensible manner. There have been lots of ways people have implemented mechanical integrity programs in the past. On the left are things that are informal and at this point totally unacceptable. They were easy, they didn't involve a lot of documentation, but if you're managing a process facility that falls into SEMS or any related safety management system programs, you just can no longer rely on people's memory, post-it notes, or just scribble marks on a calendar. You've really got to have something more substantial. Does that mean you have to do a computerized maintenance management system? No, you really don't. SEMS is a performance-based requirement, and you can use some sort of documentation. You can do it all in writing if you want to. Computerized maintenance management systems are merely designed to help get the job done, and as the agencies have noticed when they monitor the implementation of SEMP for various facilities, it helps it get done more efficiently so you can actually adhere to the requirements of the program. Now, a lot of CMMS in the past have been very expensive, training intensive, and also required a lot of specific hardware. A lot of the better systems now that are out there are web-based and fairly intuitive and require really minimal training. When you're looking at these different implementations, again, you need to look at functionality. Whether you're doing it in writing or using a computer program, you need to make sure that key functions and data are tracked. The manufacturer recommended testing frequencies, inspection frequencies, and PM frequencies, logging this information, logging observations, procedures for performing the required actions, making sure work orders get done, safety, and as part of the work orders, safety precautions, parts needed, all those things are necessary for keeping your program healthy and need to be part of your implementation of the mechanical integrity program. And don't forget to monitor the program. You've got to have performance indicators, actual frequencies of failure, how the work orders are being implemented, and some sort of trigger points that tell you if the program's not working properly and your maintenance department is getting severely backlogged. Yes, the maintenance folks will complain if they're overloaded, but don't just count on qualitative complaints to tell you if your program's working properly. You want to look at the records, look at the magnitude, look at how things slip, and what's slipping. How important is it? And also, is your maintenance department focused on things that may not be safety critical? Are they spending a lot of time dealing with very simple issues that don't have any impact, that really don't need to be part of the SEMS program in the first place? Whether it be a written program or a CMMS, you want to have some ability to distinguish between those two. So that talks about basic implementation requirements and what needs to be on there. When we have a longer venue, I'm not going to do that today. We do have our own SEMS solution software that is a CMMS package that we'll do a little demo. If anybody wants to see that, we can send a link. But just remember, there are a lot of different computerized maintenance management software packages that are out there, and there's a lot of good ways to get the job done. And we'll talk about some interface issues with corporate and other business arms that you may have in your company, and maybe some additional resources that you've got inside your own companies. So let's talk about general tips on making your program effective in terms of its implementation. First of all, best practices are where you've got organizational and internal accountability. Basically, SEMS tends to formalize that and make sure somebody's assigned to these programs as a person in charge to get the job done. Availability of equipment specifications. Good availability helps you meet the intended requirements. Clear definition of those requirements. Use of software for tracking generation of work orders, documentation, and records retention also helps you get the job done. Things that don't work anymore are fix-it failure maintenance strategies. Well, let's put it this way. It doesn't work for everything. One of the things you need to do as part of your mechanical integrity program is prioritize stuff. If you've got your maintenance department spending a lot of time on maintaining non-safety critical equipment or equipment that doesn't need to be part of SEMS, have a mechanism for putting that on a separate list of things that can be done on a casual basis or as filler activities for your maintenance department, and prioritize the things that are part of key safety impact scenarios, maybe for your HAZOP study or other types of hazards analysis, and focus on those items from both the timing perspective and how much effort you put into it. And again, in your preventive maintenance program, it has to be based on manufacturer recommendations. You have to, even if you've got a contractor doing things, you have to have a written schedule for what they're doing, and it really needs to be subsumed as part of your program. So a quick summary is mechanical integrity is an important issue for managing health and safety. It shows up at the top of what gets people in trouble, and also very close to the top of a lot of key root causes of key tragedies that have resulted in loss of life and severe environmental impact. Therefore, a high quality and formal, it's got to be written and formal, mechanical integrity program is a key element for any safety management system, including SEMS. It is a challenge. There's a lot of work required. It can't be done informally anymore. And it's also an important audit element for your own internal corporate audits, your own internal audits for looking at the health of the SEMS program. And it's going to be a key element that auditors from agencies understand and will be looking at your facility. Again, it's one of the most frequently issued SMS citations. Of course, a lot of these have come out with TSM and RMP, but there are also a lot of cases where MMS has cited facilities for mechanical integrity violations. So, as well as its safety importance, maintaining the reliability and operability of your equipment, and a balanced application of mechanical integrity is very good for business. So let's talk about some good news and some other resources that you've got. Now, when you look at the mechanical integrity requirements for SEMS, as I mentioned before, you saw a lot of overlap with other safety management system requirements, and I need to tell you that it's nearly identical in terms of the concept. A lot of these are fundamental. They're almost self-evident, but they are things that are a fundamental part of all mechanical integrity programs. Some additional emphasis points for SEMS are consistency with manufacturers' design and material specs, training and maintenance personnel to ensure that they can do the job properly to maintain equipment reliability, and also the frequencies of tests and inspections should be consistent with BSEE regulations and also industry recommended practices like things that API puts out. Modifications to equipment and systems to address their new application, that also is an emphasis point for SEMS. But the vast majority of SEMS mechanical integrity requirements are consistent with other SMS programs. So keep in mind, there's a lot to do by November 15th. We'll talk about some other things that have occurred just within the past few weeks with respect to SEMS. It's a changing landscape. It's a moving target, but there's a lot to be done by November 15th, and mechanical integrity is a key element to get on top of. The bulk of these elements are common to these other loss prevention programs, as I mentioned before. The good news is that many offshore companies that are a lot of companies that operate offshore facilities have onshore business units that are already addressing mechanical integrity issues. They may already have CMMS software, implementation practices, procedures, and a lot of things that you can tap into, and resources, personnel in other offices in your company that may be already implementing a lot of these things. So you can not only tap into those resources to help you make sure you get on top of this program, but by maintaining consistency across the corporation, you're adhering to your own best practices, and it can be a lot more efficient in terms of its implementation. So the good news is a lot of you folks already have a lot of resources that you can bring to bear on implementation of mechanical integrity. I just encourage you to make sure you minimize duplication, use as many resources as possible for your other business units, and from success strategies that they've used for maintaining their mechanical integrity program at their sites, and work towards a unified program. It'll be easier to manage, a lot easier to implement. Starting simple, taking your existing elements, what you're doing at the sites, looking at the results, look at a gap analysis, and then as necessary, update and enhance the completeness of existing analysis. Don't forget that you need to audit and monitor these programs. Very critical for ensuring their success. And the last bullet made a lot more sense a few months ago. And in fact, when we started doing these SEMS webinars back in late 2010, but right now, a lot of people are scrambling to get their programs together. Certainly, mechanical integrity is a key element. Okay, so what I'd like to do is, for the rest of our time here, is go over a lot of what's changing with respect to the regulation of SEMS for offshore facilities. I'd also like to point out some references and resources that you can use to help pull these programs together efficiently. And so what I'd like to talk about is start with is current events. The Offshore Operators Committee has not been sitting idle. They've been putting together an audit protocol that they've released and is available to help you look for gaps in your program and make sure that you're addressing SEMS properly. Earlier this year, API put together its Center for Offshore Safety. It's meant to be a focal point of key experienced personnel that can help define good applications for offshore safety. BSEE's been pretty busy. If you're not familiar with the term, as of October 1st, BOEMRE officially split up into two elements, BOEM, which is more the licensing end, and also BSEE, or the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. They're the ones who are in charge of monitoring the implementation of SEMS, helping train, provide resources, and of course, auditing and enforcement at offshore facilities. They've been pretty busy. Not only have they reorganized, there have been a lot of personnel reassigned to various training activities, etc. But they've also been putting out some supplemental regulations. there's a proposed rule that was put in the Federal Register on September 14th that provided some additional emphasis points on SEMS. The key things are stop work authority, employee participation, reporting unsafe work conditions, and they provided a lot of clarifications on two other key areas. One being job safety analysis, which is something you guys all should be working on or have completed by now. But what they've done is they've put together a lot of other emphasis points in this proposed rule that was put out on September 14th. The challenge is for some folks is going to be that this proposed rule is going to be is out there for public comment until November 14th. Then after that, they'll absorb the comments, address them, and at that point there may be an update to SEMS, which can change the landscape on these two key activities: your job safety analysis and also the auditing requirements. The auditing requirements right now is you do need to get an independent third party. There needs to be an audit plan submitted at least 30 days beforehand, and also the requirements for prioritizing the documentation of the audit and scheduling of corrective actions based on the priority of what the action is. So there's a lot of things that can impact what you're doing there. I would encourage you to be knowledgeable of that and get up to speed on what might be on the not too far horizon on that. Also, Bessie's been actively involved in issuing some guidance. Earlier this week, Monday, they issued an NTL that provided some additional guidance for the implementation of SEMS. That's available off the Bessie website. And also, if anybody needs a copy or needs a link to it, feel free to post a message to our producer, Solveig Sather, on the chat window, and we'll go ahead and make sure you get a follow-up email after that. So that's out, and although it doesn't really have any new requirements, it does have some clarification of emphasis points, and for mechanical integrity, especially the documentation issues. As part of the NTL, they specifically mention documentation is required concerning the inspection and testing of the operator's equipment and systems, and also the documentation must include, among other things, the date of the inspection or test, and the name, position, and signature of the person who performed the inspection or test. So yes, that's part of a good, sound program. It meets the performance-based requirements. What they're doing is putting out some guidance on a variety of elements in this NTL to help people identify what the emphasis points are. Also coming up in DC is going to be 2 meetings for the Ocean Energy Safety Advisory Committee, one on November 7th that's going to talk about progress, what they've been up to, and also talk about interim recommendations on oil spill prevention, containment, spill response, and safety management systems. And also on the next day, Tuesday, November 8th, they're going to talk about incident data analysis and some of their findings from their Deepwater Horizon investigations. And again, the information on those are on the Bessie website. Okay, I think that about does it for current events. Again, while I'm doing this closeout here and giving you some other resources, think about any questions that you've got. At the very end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions if you want to vocalize it or start a discussion with the other participants. You're welcome to do that. We can go ahead and unmute you. If you want to post a specific question, you're welcome to do that via the chat window to our producer, Solveig Sather. So let's talk about some other references and resources that you've got out there. For your background, and this is available off our website, we've got videos of previous webinars that we've done starting in mid-2010 to provide overviews of various process safety items, how offshore facilities have addressed it, the various techniques that are out there. We also spent some time, if you're interested in safety cases, providing some background on that. Again, all these are spin-offs from our engineering consulting activities where we've worked actively with both onshore and offshore facilities, helping them implement safety management systems. We have a variety of topics, and when the SEMS regs came out in fall, we started providing a rotating series on how to address all the elements in a lot of the things that are happening. The hazards analysis is a key area, mechanical integrity. Basically, those key items in red, more than anything else, deserve the utmost priority. We've continued, as you see, with other webinars that provide background on these things. Again, if you need a video, it's available off our website, or if you have any troubles with that, just send us an email, and I'll give you some contact points in a second, and we'll be glad to provide you with additional information. So we tried to maintain an active series on offshore facilities webinars focused on SEMS to help folks out as they've been working towards this November 15th deadline. We've also got some other things that are coming up. As things change, again, this is a moving target, especially since you've got another proposed rule out there that we don't know when that's going to get implemented or what sort of enforcement requirements they're going to have and implementation dates for that. But what we've got coming up on December 6th is a webinar. It's pretty exciting. There's actually some software out there that was developed in the UK called ProSaint that helps link together key operating steps. And once those steps are defined and their implications, it dovetails with the JSA and automatically gets you started on the JSA and identifies key parts of that, and also helps you craft initial operating procedures. Pretty exciting stuff. We've also got a bow tie seminar coming up on January 24th, 25th. Now, bow ties are not required by regulation, but a lot of people have found it useful after you've done the hazards analysis and identifying key scenarios for managing those and making sure that both graphically and from an importance perspective they show up to management and stay at the top of the list with respect to training at facilities. Upcoming webinars, again, December 6th is a freebie on ProSaint. December 8th is talking about audit techniques. For those of you who were in a rush to get your SEMS program together, this is a good time to step back early December, learn about how to use audit techniques, do a gap analysis to see if there's any problems that you can correct before somebody else finds them. January 17th next year, tips for training, contractor safety management. Management of contractors is another key emphasis point. In fact, that's another item that came up in their proposed rule with additional emphasis points for that. Late January, as I mentioned, the two-day bow tie risk analysis seminar, incident investigation in February, and also in March, offshore facilities emergency action plans. Other resources that we've got here, the BESI site is up there, and if your favorites on your web browser still have doemre.gov, that still works. It just takes you there and then gives you another link to their reorganized BESI site. We've got a number of links internally for rmpcorp.com and also SEMS1.com that have resources and other information available to you. And of course, the API has done some very good work towards making available some of its key safety standards for you to observe and view on the web at no cost. You've got to go through a registration process, but it's a really good resource where you can get access to all these. Take a look at it. In a lot of cases, you probably want to buy copies for yourself too, but the API at least makes these key safety items available to you. So again, I'll take questions in just a minute, but while you're thinking about those questions, these are contact points for me. The 877 number comes to our central location, and also to kick off resources that are available to you, www.rmpcorp.com is a key launch point for that. So I think that about does it for the overview, and I can take questions if we have any.
We do, Steve. We have one question. Following up on your comment regarding SEMS being a performance-based management system, do you see the SEMS rule as a performance-based requirement operating well within what is generally prescriptive regulatory environment?
Yes, I think the crux of that is SEMS is a performance-based requirement. It dovetails with the 1987 CCPS Technical Management Guideline. It correlates quite well with process safety management that was promulgated in 1992, and also risk management programs in 1996. All those are performance-based requirements, and in addition to these performance-based requirements, you still have the prescriptive items. If there are regulatory requirements that specify to do something on a certain frequency, and it's very specific, those have to be done in addition to SEMS. If there are discontinuities or if they're not consistent, you want to reconcile those internally or get clarification from the regulator. Anything else?
In regard to the mechanical integrity requirement of using the manufacturer's recommended testing, inspection, and preventive maintenance tasks and frequencies, that is not always the case at facilities that they follow to the letter the frequencies and tasks required for that piece of equipment. And the general answer tends to be that the contractor's experience makes up for it, or his experience has shown that the things he's implementing are adequate over his 15 to 20 years. My question is that acceptable? And if it's acceptable to just use his experience and knowledge, what kind of documentation needs to be provided?
Okay, that's a really good question. And the short answer is yes, it is acceptable. Now, with some caveats, just like everything else, even if you got manufacturer recommendations, and manufacturer recommendations aren't available for all equipment. You also have as resources other offshore facilities of similar vintage, maybe some of your peers that are willing to share information. Many offshore facilities have changed hands to have different owners and operators over the years too. So there's a lot of cross-pollination and information out there. If there's any significant discrepancy between the manufacturer's recommendations and what has been found to work well in industry, that's simply a matter of in your mechanical integrity program, when you're defining it in your computerized maintenance management system or in the file folder for that particular equipment, you put some sort of note or some sort of information that you recognize, here's the manufacturer's requirement, or you recognize, here's some recommended practice, but here's what works at our facility and here's why. You may have a piece of equipment that's designed for very high pressures and high temperatures that's in very benign service. It may be designed with metallurgy that can withstand very corrosive environments. You may have it in very benign service. So if based on your service, based on your installation, you have a basis for relaxing the requirements, document the basis. If you've been using the equipment for 20 years and it's not beyond its design life, and you can say, you know, we've inspected it for manufacturer's recommendations every week for 20 years, and it's been 100% reliable. It's time to go back and say, like, look, we're going to go ahead and relax the inspection frequency. So the short answer is yes. The key thing is to document it and provide a justification. Anything else? All right. Again, my name is Steve Marr. I appreciate you guys joining us today. I hope you got something out of it. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to call us, and you'll probably be seeing some of us folks out there helping lots of your facilities over the years. Thank you.